What's going on, everyone? Darkside Phil here, and welcome to another edition of the Hateful Truth video game review series, where I give you maximum truth and minimum bullshit regarding my personal experience with the newest video game releases. And today we're going to talk about a game that I think actually had massive potential just because the premise is kind of interesting. And it's funny to see games like this that when they're first announced and you hear about them in development, that you're like, oh wow, man, that one sounds like a good one. That's what I'm going to put on my radar. And then finally when the game is actually released, to little or no hoopla whatsoever, you're kind of like, what the hell am I playing? This game takes something that I think could really be a major hit and just runs it into the ground with tired, boring, repetitive gameplay. Just game mechanics that don't belong in the game to begin with, and it's just really odd. I can't believe that they did this with the game. So the game we're talking about, unfortunately, and I hate to say this because in the past I've played this series of games and actually enjoyed them. The game is 007 Legends for the Xbox 360, okay? And yeah, I know, if you've been listening to the mainstream media, a lot of critics have been panning this game. Well, unlike what they do, I am actually going to list a lot of positives about the game. Then I'm going to tell you where I feel they really kind of misstepped, lost their direction. And then I'm going to say who would probably like to play the game and give it a rating, okay? So 007 Legends is a simple premise. Let's take some of the most iconic and favorite movies in the 007 history of 007, including 5 different Bonds that had played in these movies, and pretend that Daniel Craig had always been James Bond and put him into those situations, okay? And so what ends up happening is it dramatically changes the plot lines of some of these iconic Bond movies because it puts a modern twist on some of this older tech. So for example, when Daniel Craig goes to infiltrate Goldfinger's hideout, he actually uses his smartphone to look in walls and find security devices and hack things and find a hidden safe and do that kind of stuff, okay? It's interesting, to say the least, that, the Daniel Craig character, how his personality and the way that he does things can change some of your favorite classic Bond moments and also some of the coolest villain fights, okay? That being said, a lot of people hate Daniel Craig as Bond. They've been saying that he's not good looking. They say that he's blonde and there should never be a blonde Bond. There's a lot of things that have been said about Daniel Craig as Bond, and right there I think just off the start you're putting a premise and you're putting a big negative on it by putting a Bond in there that a lot of people don't even like. And you might say to yourself, well, how the hell are they going to do this? What kind of game will this be? Well, it's a first-person shooter. So they took the easy way out. They really did. They took the most generic, bland genre of gaming right now, one where every single game it has some kind of a first-person shooter twist to it these days. And of course, they released this during the hardcore gaming season, where you already have superior first-person shooters like Borderlands 2, ones that you know are bound to be blockbusters like Halo 4 and Call of Duty Black Ops 2, and that's when they released this game. So it's kind of laughable. Like, wow, did you really think that your 007 Legends game was going to stand up to the big boys? And you might say, well, yeah, that might be a ballsy move. Maybe they really did think that this would stand up to it. But if you actually played the game, you definitely wouldn't be saying that, okay? So let me start to explain. 007 Legends has you jumping from campaign to campaign, again, playing as Daniel Craig in this dream sequence, because at the beginning of the game he actually gets sniped and he falls off a train and he's in this water delirious. And I guess this is a take off of something that's going to happen in the new Skyfall Bond movie, okay? Because what ends up happening is after you beat all 5 of the dream campaigns, next month after the release of the Skyfall movie, there's going to be a free DLC where you play as Daniel Craig in Skyfall. So what they did, Skyfall is completed, it's already done, but what they decided to do is let's not spoil the movie, let's just make it a time release thing, which is what it's going to be. So for me reviewing this game, yeah, I am reviewing this game before I do play the Skyfall portion of the game, but that being said, I mean, I really don't think that it's going to add such a significant amount of content that you know, it's worth delaying the review for, okay? So, each of the dream missions consists of about 2 to 3 different stages, okay? The stages can range from as short as 5 minutes long to as long as an hour, okay? So that's just the scope of some of the things that happen here. Now, the majority of the gameplay of this game unfortunately ends up being generic first-person shooter firefights. And what I mean that is, yes, you can take cover behind objects, you can peek out over the edge and shoot sideways like this, but primarily you're going to be pretending like you're playing Call of Duty, and that's no exaggeration either. The game plays like Call of Duty. It's got auto-aim assist, it's got, you know, regenerating health. Now, in defense of the game does actually give you the option to choose whether or not you like regenerating health, or you would like an older health model where you get hurt and then you have to pick up health items in order to recuperate your health. So it's up to you how to play the game. I picked regenerating health because obviously that's how the modern games have been over the past several years. And so a lot of the game is going to be infiltrate this area, try not to be seen. And in some cases, this will be easy. You'll actually be able to just crouch around, walk around dudes. You'll see dudes patrolling back and forth or whatever. You'll see a security camera here or there. So you'll use a silence pistol to take out the cameras, and then you'll walk around, try to get around the dudes without being seen. Maybe do a couple stealth takedowns when they're not looking, and you get from point A to point B. But eventually, there are going to be parts in each stage where you have to do these generic first-person shooter firefights, okay? And this is where the game fails on a higher level. In fact, it's funny because at the points in time in 007 Legends that you're not shooting, that you don't have a gun in your hand, those are probably the highest points of the game. It seems like whenever it goes to gunplay, the game gets it totally wrong. So let me explain. Enemies, first of all, take way too many bullets to kill. A lot of these enemies are running at you and you're hitting them with 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds and they're still fine and they're still shooting and you're like, give me a fucking break, man. Later on in the game, there actually become some more weapons that are a little bit more powerful that take them down a little bit more quickly, but for the majority of the game, you're taking forever to kill anything. In addition to that, there's just way too many enemies in a lot of these portions of the game. Now, let me give you some perspective. In the next to last level of the game, I spent 8 minutes and 45 seconds fighting in one room while the enemies kept respawning. I'm not exaggerating. If you don't believe me, go watch the Moonraker campaign portion of this. And in the hangar where the space shuttle is, you will fight for 8.5 minutes fighting enemies that just keep fucking spawning and coming. To the point where you're like, oh my god, like, even Call of Duty in the final stages of the game isn't that bad, okay? It's really annoying. It's just like, give me a break. I throw in the towel. I don't want to play anymore because I'm tired of killing people. How many fucking henchmen realistically could the Bond villains hire? Like, I mean, do they have $5 billion to hire a fucking personal army of people? It just makes no sense. Like, yeah, in the Bond movies, there were villains, they always had henchmen, but it wasn't like just an endless line of dudes walking through a door keep shooting at you. Like, what the fuck? It's just unbearable, okay? The actual FPS gameplay is very cheesy, meaning it's nothing unique to it whatsoever. It's pretty much lifted from every other FPS game. Now, during the course of the game, as you complete certain missions and objectives, you actually will unlock experience points that allow you to either accentuate your character through upgrades or to also upgrade your guns. And you can add things like an ACOG scope, a red dot sight, a grenade launcher, a silencer. However, 99% of the time you don't ever need to upgrade your weapons. Reason being, you're going to find an abundance of weapons in the game that already have cool enhancements. So you may start out with a general machine gun, but by the time you're, a quarter into the stage, you've already found one with a silencer and a scope and everything, and you don't need anything else. So it's completely unnecessary to ever modify your guns. Instead, what I did was modify myself, and within 2 to 3 body upgrades, I almost became like the Terminator, where it was like I was just running into rooms like a bullet sponge. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, I find a guy. Boom, 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 boom. Run behind cover quickly to regenerate my health a little bit. Run out again. Boom, boom. Completely unsafely. Run out into the open. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, gotta regenerate my health again. All right, gotta come back out. Boom, 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 boom. And there's just like, that's not James Bond. That's like the opposite of James Bond. Okay. James Bond is a spy. He tries to infiltrate. He tries to fool people by making them think he's somebody else. Or he sneaks around. And in the game's defense, there is some sneaking gameplay as well, as I've previously mentioned. The problem is a lot of the times it's just not needed, because if you do body upgrades, you're done. You can literally mow through most of the game just running and gunning and not worrying about playing it like you're James Bond. In fact, in a lot of cases, the sneaking gameplay is annoying. It's almost like they wanted to make a first-person shooter Metal Gear Solid game, or similar, like maybe they were trying to copy off of Deus Ex Human Revolution, which just recently was released last year. But there's really just nothing unique here whatsoever, and ultimately it's just really a boring mess. Now, some of the things that I think that they actually do get right are the things that try to make it a unique modern twist on these classic Bond stories. So Daniel Craig gets to use his smartphone. And when he's using his smartphone, he looks around the room and he can use X-rays to actually see electrical lines that go to certain things. And finally he can find maybe a panel that he can hack with his smartphone that allows another secret panel to open, and then you get the intel or whatever you need to progress through the game. And so some of it is pretty interesting to see those twists, okay, of how is the Daniel Craig Bond going to do it. On the flip side of it, because the Daniel Craig Bond is such a in-your-face violent guy, if you remember from the recent movies, he's always, he's really almost like Smash Mouth kind of a Bond. Almost every villain he gets into a fist fight with, and it's completely laughable because the fist fight sequence is nothing more than a glorified QuickTime sequence that every single person becomes the worst boxer in the world. I mean, literally, you're going to fight, I think his name is Belford or whatever, the guy that looks like Dr. Evil, that they modeled Dr. Evil after, and he goes to fight you like this, like he's a boxer, so he's got his hands up, so obviously you do a body blow, and then he goes, oh, and he covers that, so you hit him in the face, and it's the most slow, boring, stupid fights that you've ever seen in your life. It just is so bad. It's laughable. It's like a Flash game you're playing. Really, it feels like you're playing a Flash game. It's that bad. And every major villain fights the fucking same. So there's really no variety between the battles when you're finally fighting these iconic Bond villains. They're all almost identical, which is really fucking stupid, okay? So, there are also, in addition to the first-person shooter gameplay, the sneaking gameplay, the stupid fighting gameplay, and also the hacking gameplay using with your phone, which also, by the way, can look for fingerprints and can also take photos, by the way. There are certain times in the games when you need to do both of those things. There's also some cool on-rail segments, a couple driving segments. Some of them are good, some of them are awful. For example, there's a snowmobile stage where the controls blink in front of you while you're supposed to be attacking three guys that are like on snowmobiles in front of you because they're chasing someone. So you're like, oh, you're trying to shoot them, then you're trying to read the controls and you can't read it. And what you don't know is that you need to actually hold down both bumpers in order to get a speed boost to stay caught up with the person you're trying to protect. And because of that, I failed the fucking thing like 20 times in a row. It's completely asinine. And in addition to that, the controls are not listed anywhere in the instruction booklet for the game or in the actual instructions in the game, its menus itself. There's no snowmobile control layout. So if you miss it that first time, you're fucked. You'll never see the controls again, and you'll have to replay it constantly like I did. That segment itself also sucks because the controls are bad. It's hard to control the snowmobile back and forth, and you're going to be ramming into trees, and you're going to be fucking up constantly. Similar to that, later on, there's a car chase where you're chasing someone in a car, and you're trying to stop them. The game says, oh, dodge these lasers and missiles, and then use your targeting system to fire at the car. But guess what? The game never tells you how to fire. So you're pressing every button, you're like, what do I do here? How do I do this? It's like amateur night. Like, a video game should tell you how to play the game these days. This isn't the 1990s where it's cryptic and you need to go buy Nintendo Power in order to figure out the basics of a video game. So it's really fucking stupid, okay? But there were some segments, like there were some on-rail shooter segments and things that I thought were okay. They were passable. They did serve to break up the gameplay a little bit, and that was neat that it was in there. Now, completely outside of the regular missions here in the game actually gives you several challenges, okay? Now, what this is basically you're playing through the campaign, but you have to do it in a certain way. So there may be a for one stage, if you get from point A to point B and you never get detected by anyone, you're just stealthy the whole time, you'll complete a challenge and maybe get some bonus experience, okay? But most of the time, you don't know what these challenges are. You actually have to go to a special menu to try to figure out what these challenges are. And for the most part, people who are just playing through the game aren't going to give a shit that you're basically challenging yourself to do this in a special way to make it more difficult just to get maybe some bonus points and possibly achievement points or trophies later on in the game. It's not really worth it. In fact, it is kind of lame. So, you've got 5 campaigns, and the ones that you go through, just so you know. Goldfinger, Moonraker, Die Another Day, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and License to Kill. Not necessarily in that order. And there were some really weird things that I noticed. Like, some of the main characters, like the guy, I forget the actor's name who played Sanchez in License to Kill, and also Benicio del Toro, his character. The actual actors are the people who are in this game playing the villains. So it's like you're watching the movie, you're interacting with the movie. But then later on, when you're doing Die Another Day, the female lead in that Die Another Day was played by Halle Berry. In this game, she's a white British chick. What? Why did they do that? Was it that they couldn't get the rights to certain likenesses, but they could only get the rights to others? Then why even bother? Like, it was really odd that some of it, like License to Kill, felt spot on, like you're playing the game, and then you go play Die Another Day, and the main, woman isn't even in it, and you're like, what the hell? Pussy galore you could get, but you couldn't get Halle Berry? Very odd. Very, very odd. But yeah, the 5 campaigns, like I said, completely vary in time and length because it all depends on the type of mission. But overall, each one's going to at least take you an hour to beat, okay? So you're talking, you're going to at least probably get 6 to 8 hours of gameplay out of the campaign of 007 Legends. Then you've got multiplayer, and multiplayer seems like an interesting mishmash because it looks like they literally tried everything, okay? You've got your standard team deathmatch and your regular deathmatch modes. You've got a Legends mode where you get to select either one of the classic Bond heroes or villains, and they each have their own unique loadout and a unique ability that they get to use during this deathmatch style gameplay. It's neat to mess around a match or two, but ultimately it's just deathmatch. There's nothing really big or major or new here. It's kind of boring. There's a golden gun mode where there's you're in a map. It's a deathmatch setting, but there's a golden gun hidden somewhere on the stage. And if you find it, it's a one-shot kill. But the downfall is after one shot, you have to reload the gun. So if you miss, you're pretty much fucked. If you get a kill with the golden gun, you get double points. So it's cool to find the gun and maybe rack up the kills. So you can maybe get a big lead or come back if you were behind. But ultimately, it's just deathmatch. Again, it's a generic FPS deathmatch. There's nothing really here to say, wow, this is great about its generic FPS gameplay. There's a mode that's like capture certain points on the map, and you have to hold them. So it's like domination in Call of Duty. It's almost exactly like domination, okay? There are other game modes. I'd love to talk about them, but I can't because no one's playing them. It's a game that hasn't even been out for a week yet, and I played it at a prime time. It was like 8 p.m., so a lot of people are playing games around that time. They're at home, and there was just nobody playing half the game modes, which is a shame because there's a lot of game modes. There's something like 10 to 12 different multiplayer modes, but I could only find people playing 4 of them. So, that being said, the multiplayer of 007 Legends probably isn't going to be a big focus. In fact, if you don't play the multiplayer within the next couple of weeks, I would probably assume that most people won't even be playing it anymore, and it won't even be a factor. So really what you're getting when you get 007 Legends is a game that can be anywhere from 6 to 8 hours long. You're going to be going through 5 different campaigns, facing off against the iconic Bond villains. You're getting a what-if scenario of Daniel Craig, how he would handle it if he was put into the situation. But primarily what you're getting is kind of a generic, wonky at times, action game that doesn't really know what it wants to be. It's a combination of a generic first-person shooter with some hand-to-hand combat elements that are extremely repetitive and boring, combined with some weird kind of, hacking, searching, espionage kind of gameplay where you're trying to be a spy and find secrets with the smartphone. It just really doesn't know what it wants to be, okay? It's a very odd game in that regard. And what I have to say is this. Unfortunately, because there are so many issues, the fact that it's generic, it's boring to play through. In fact, I say the most entertaining part of 007 Legends is the fact that you're playing as a Daniel Craig and you get to relive some of these classic Bond plot lines, because there haven't been a lot of Bond video games to handle the older stuff. All this stuff, except for, I'd say, Die Another Day, was pretty much back before the modern era of video games, and it wasn't capable to be an interactive version of those movies. Now you can finally live that. But if you don't like James Bond, if you don't like those old movies, you are going to hate this game. In fact, if this game didn't have Bond in it, if this was like Joe Smith Secret Agent, I don't think anyone would play this game. I don't think it would be a horrible value, and people would just say, I don't get it. So really, the only real thing going for the game is that it's Bond. It's the license. This is a case where the license is selling the game, okay? And it almost feels like, oh, we got to make a game to tie in for Skyfall. Quick, throw something together. So they did, and then they decided to merge it with Bond. I don't know. It was really odd the way that it was done. So the one thing, again, that I do want to reiterate before I review the game is that Skyfall is not available yet. Who knows? Maybe the Skyfall free DLC could be a 10-hour long fucking amazing campaign. I really doubt it. I think it's going to be the same as all the other campaigns. Probably 2 missions that are anywhere between, 10 to 45 minutes each. So maybe it'll add another hour and a half of gameplay to the game, but I really doubt it's going to add anything altogether to the content of the game. So assuming that the Skyfall DLC is 2 to 3 hours long, you're going to get about a 10-hour campaign out of 007 Legends. But a lot of the times you're going to be bored, it's going to be repetitive, you're going to have to keep grinding through these insanely long firefights with not infinitely spawning, but just spawning for way too long enemies, and it really does feel like it's a joke almost, like they didn't take the game seriously. Which is a shame, because I think Bond, if had a good game, like remember GoldenEye? The game was great. That game went on to almost define the FPS genre for quite some time. And it was like, how can you make an iconic game like GoldenEye, and then now in modern times you can't even pull off like an okay game? 007 Legends is actually poorer than the average game. That's right. It's just not very good. It's boring, it's repetitive. The only thing it really has going for it is that it has Bond. But it is a playable game. I can't say the game's broken or that, things prevent you from beating it. If anything, I could say the game is actually overly easy. It seems like because you can become Terminator Bond with all these upgrades, that you can go from point A to point B and beat the game, and, without relative much challenge. I probably died a few times, but most of the time it was only because it was like near the end of the game and it was the last few firefights where things were getting retardedly hard. Really, there never wasn't that much challenge. I just kind of soared right through the game. Even with the control issues and the things that I was experiencing, I was still able to progress and beat most stuff. So, that being said, 007 Legends, a game that I feel had massive potential because the idea behind it is great, but the execution is very poor. Subpar gameplay. By the way, lots of graphical tearing. I do want to mention that. On the Xbox 360, so much screen tearing, I couldn't believe it. So the graphics aren't too hot. The gameplay is not very good. It's repetitive and boring. The controls aren't self-explanatory in a lot of places, which is really annoying. The game just isn't very good. So I'm going to give 007 Legends a 3.5 out of 10. It's not even as good as the average game, but it's playable. So I have to give it some points. There were some points in the game when I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. I'm doing hand-to-hand combat with Benicio del Toro. Then I would realize, oh yeah, I already did this same exact combat sequence 7 other times during the course of the game, and I'd be frustrated and just want it to end. So, 007 Legends, I only recommend this game to die-hard Bond fans, and I only recommend a rent. However, since the gameplay sucks so bad, you probably don't even want to rent it. You should just watch my playthrough of the game, get it over with, and say, alright, chalk this one off. Activision, another failure, even though I know they probably didn't actually develop the core of the game, but bad game, don't waste your time. It's rare when I have to say that, but it's a stinker. Avoid it like a stinky, smelly anus. That's it for the Hateful Truth video game review. I hope you found that there was maximum truth and minimum bullshit about this episode's release. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and I will see you next time. Peace.